in the 30s, we hauled water from McKinnon's. Very often it was scruffy and green if it was low. When before wash days, we would probably fill 3 or 4 barrels with water, and my mother would put wood ashes in each pail and stir it, and that happened 3 or 4 times before Mondays, and the wood ashes softened the water and settled all the scum. Then we would take that water off. It was relatively clear and clean. We'd strain it, we'd heat it for washing, and washing was done by hand on the washboard in those days.
Without power, like wash day, it was all day long on the washboard, and by the time you were finished, your knuckles were bleeding. And then to try and, especially in winter, try and get that stuff dry, maybe 20 below zero, and you're out there hanging clothes into that cold. Times were tough. People nowadays have no idea how hard it was. How hard, especially the women, how hard they had to work.
We had dust storms like you wouldn't believe. It would start and blow for about 3 days. There would be dust on the windowsills. You would turn, when you set the table, you turned your plates upside down, or there would be dust in those plates. The houses had no insulation. That dirt just came through. And I mean, lots of days you couldn't see from the barn to the house.
It was very tough. We were hard put sometimes to have food on the table because it didn't rain. We'd get from the Maritimes, they'd ship out these bags of potatoes, and we'd go and get our couple bags of potatoes, and they usually had something else in them. At one time in the top of the bag there was a bunch of little red apples. They were eating apples, but not as big as the Macintosh, and a pure red all around. Another time, at the top of the bag, they had 2 cans of corned beef. Another time in the bag was a couple of turnips. And you know, things like, oh, and another time a quart jar of pure strawberry jam. Boy, that was something to get that when you had nothing.
35 was a bad year. The rust came through in 35, and Dad's wheat was a complete wipeout. They burnt it because it was all rusted out, but the oats and barley was okay. And I remember Dad getting us kids up early in the morning to come out and listen to Uncle Sid, which was Sid G. He had a real big thrashing outfit up north, a steam engine. And he had different whistles for different things. A certain whistle for the water truck, a whistle for the men to start to work, another whistle for all different blasts, you know. And that was about 5 miles away, and on a clear morning you could hear that, and I've never forgot that.
When I was 5 years of age, I remember my mother bringing in a wagon load of wheat to the elevator in town. Partway into town, the box was designed with a dual end gate, and the lower section of the end gate bulged out, pushed out, and the grain nearly disappeared. And we had to spend considerable time scooping the grain ahead at that time to push that end gate back into place and then proceed into town. When we arrived in town, we crossed on the east old crossing in Cupar here to the elevator, and the train happened to come in. And the noise was irritable to our horses because the horses just started to stampede. And we had an awful time getting the horses settled down so that we could get that load of grain unloaded and get ready to go back home again.
You had, I think, 2 years to break 10 acres of soil to get the title. And he went to work, and then he paid for his, he paid for his, or he got it. he got his neighbour, there was some neighbours over there already, and they put two oxen together and he broke up 10 acres. And he went with a shovel and he threshed his first grain after he got married. Threshed his first grain with a what you call them? Flail. And that flail is still in the museum over here. I brought it in. The first wheat he threshed.
What was it called?
Flail.
Flail.
Yeah. It's 2 sticks.
2 sticks.
Did you ever see one? There's a short piece of stick, and there's a knob on the end with a leather. You know what leather they made from cattle or they hide, and then they put a long end on it, and they you know that swung, and they put a blanket on it, put the wheat on it, and they just start slapping it down, and that's how they thresh the wheat.
Well, I can remember even the first war, stories from the first war in 1914, when it broke out. I was one of the first in our town to hear the news. This guy was running to the Indian school. We lived in LeBret, and the Indian school was there, and this guy was running to tell the people at the school, and I happened to be outside, so he hollered to me that France and Germany have started. That's just when the news came over it came to the station. We had no phones then yet, or radios, of course, so the station agent, he got the news on the radio, at the station, you know. So that's how we got to know. So I say I was one of the first ones in the village to hear it. I happened to be outside.
Our aircraft was shot down in 1943. And I was been a prisoner of war for 2.5 years then.
There's no good memories there.
Oh, they're good.
Yeah?
I made the best of everything, or tried to.
So you were in Italy?
Oh yes. When the aircraft I was in was shot down over North Africa, right near the end of what they call the African campaign. And I moved to Italy quickly. But I was escaped 2 twice.
And you actually got away.
One was when the Italians quit. And we just literally walked out. And we weren't gone long, and the Germans picked us up again shortly. This is where I made friends, you know, and short time. Then after being recaptured, we were on our way to Germany, and one of my friends had a screwdriver, and we took the bars out of the windows on the carriage and jumped out. So 9 months later I got caught again. I guess
You got caught again.
oh yeah, that's funny. And I went to Germany. All my friends wanted to escape, but I didn't feel like it anymore. They didn't either. But you know, you have friends forever there in those things.
We had one casualty. And one almost casualty. The plane I was looking after, one of the 2 planes I was looking after, was flying one day on the mission, and the co-pilot got up out of the seat and went back to talk to some of the other guys that were with him. When they came back, there was a hole in the seat. Bullet, small bullet, high-powered rifle or something, and nailed the bucket he was supposed to be sitting in. And he was a lucky boy that time. He kind of had the shivers when he came back. To smooth out his seat before he could sit down.
Well, as a matter of fact, we won the Canadian Army Championship in England in 1941 and 42, which was softball, but not baseball. But
In England?
yeah. Yeah, we were pretty lucky. We were excused all that Army junk to play ball as long as we were winning. Jeez, drinking beer, chasing girls, and playing ball. And when you went overseas, which I spent most of my time overseas, you had to send home $20 a month or defer it. They would keep it for you till after the war. And you're getting $39 a month, so you're getting $19 a month to spend, and $20 was either kept for you or you sent it home, you know. But you didn't really need any money because there was lots of ways to make money in the Army, that's for sure. None of which were legitimate, but still.
But it was a common practice.
Yeah, right, everybody was doing it.
Irons, heated in the oven, wrapped up in old towels and put into your bed at night, or even a rock quite often. And very often we had a rock heated in the oven and wrapped up in old clothes, put into the cutter or the sleigh if we went to town. It gave off heat for a good long while. It kept your feet warm.
So you put a rock in the oven and...
Yeah, we'd put a rock in the oven. We had a foot warmer too. It had a charcoal coal that was heated in the stove, and when it was red, you put it out to put it in the little tray in the foot warmer and put it in, and you made sure that it got enough air so it could open the vent enough so it would burn very slowly, and it would keep warm for several hours and would keep your feet warm. In fact, one of ours is in the museum here at Cupar.
I had an experience at school one time when we were going to school. We had 2.5 mile trip to go to school in a country school, and we were going to Maryville School at the time, and we had a little pony with a cutter, and of course we'd take our blankets and cover up, but that didn't keep us too warm because it wasn't sealed, it was an open unit. And many times in the morning the roads were very poor, so the snow had piled up in big drifts and the horse would just jump in the snow. We had to unhook it many times and pull the sleigh ourselves, cut her through the snowbanks, and then hook it back up again. And that was something I'll never forget. Our legs used to get cold. It was a very hard time of life at that time. Very difficult times.
Oh, okay, go for the recess time and put it in the teacher's desk. I think we deserved every licking we got. There's no question about that. And some that we got away with.
I often walked home in my bare feet if it was wet and muddy. It was easier to clean muddy feet than muddy shoes. And besides, we had to take care of our shoes. Lunch pails were usually Rogers syrup pails or maple leaf lard pails because they had a handle on them. Dune Creek School at the time was a one-room school, heated by a pot-belly heater in the winter. The floors were always cold. Sometimes the older boys trapped gophers. Gopher tails brought a penny apiece, if I remember correctly. this was one way of keeping them under control. Crow's eggs also brought a penny apiece.
The most exciting time was when they were paying a small amount of money for the gopher tails. And I remember the youngsters were just after those gophers, but I don't know, there were an awful lot of gophers in those days, you know. Because even when you caught 30 or 40 gophers, there was still a whole bunch of gophers around. Whereas later on the gopher population went down and there's hardly any gophers around now. But at that time that was unreal. There was gophers everywhere.
So you would get gopher tails.
Oh yeah, you take the gopher tails and you get, I don't know, 1 or 2 pennies a piece for the tails. And that was something, because we never had any money in those days. It was just money wasn't available. So 1 or 2 pennies looked like big money at that time.
I remember one incident coming home from school in the wintertime. Though there were only my sister and I, we often had 3 or 4 hitchhikers that were dropped off along the way. This particular day there had been a big snowstorm and the snowdrift had formed in the gateway. As we made the turn, the cutter upset, and there were school bags, kids, lunch kits, blankets everywhere in the snow. I remember thinking it was so funny, I just laughed, and my sister was so cross at me. The horse ran away and left us in the snow. Fortunately, some farmer was coming along the way. He stopped our horse and brought her back to school, and we got home safe and sound.
Well, that's what we call it in those days. Nowadays it's First Nations, but then it was the Indian school. They used to get the Indian kids from the time they were about 6 years old till they were about 16, and teach them English. And at that time they figured 10 years they had that they'd be a part of the rest of us, they figured they wouldn't be Indians anymore, but I guess they didn't succeed, and I'm glad they didn't,
Yeah.
I look back, I think of people surviving on these prairies here, and the more I think of it, the more I appreciate those, I call them the Indian people, that they managed to survive in this awful climate with just the way they had their tents, and that was way back when, of course.
It had some good old days there. Our fairgrounds at that time had a full track all the way around, and the Indians would come from miles away, and they would have they had a tall on power poles where the judges would sit up on, and Allie Lynch and Shorty Corbett, and they were the main judges, and the track was a half a mile. And that was a big attraction on July the 1st, usually there was hundreds and hundreds of people would come there, and they had ball games and whatnot, but the horse races was the big thing.
Pony races, Shetland pony races. I rode in some of them. I had a little bigger pony than most of them. It wasn't a pure Shetland, it was a cross of some sort. I don't know if it was crossed with Welsh or what. But anyway, he was a little bigger and a little faster, so he always was handicapped at the start, way behind, and he'd win the race anyhow. He was a horse that couldn't stand to be left behind. He had to be out in front. He knew a race when he saw one.
Now those were at the sports days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's quite a few people had bigger horses, full-size horses, and some of our neighboring Indians had their horses, they'd bring them in. They're usually the ones that won the races. Ones their neighbors had were too fat or something.
Nearly everybody played ball and played hockey. And that was the big thing, you know. And the sports days were great. You'd play ball, you'd ride horses, you'd go running and high jump and hop, skip and jump and everything to make a nickel, you know.
You were saying they fished with a pitchfork?
Yeah, fish.
With a pitchfork?
Yeah. You know, well, the creek wasn't that deep. You know, it was running on, and there was in our field over there was big stones in the bottom of the creek, and that's they used to like to. They said the fish used to like to stay there and kind of warm or rest or whatever, and they would go if they could go there quiet and put the pitchfork under the fish. They would just step it out from there. And once it flips out on the ground where the fish couldn't swim.
Was there prohibition in Canada?
Yeah, we did. And that was funny too, because before that nobody drank. And once Prohibition came in, everybody was making home brew, including me. But I had a cousin going to the university in Saskatoon, and he was taking that. So he brought me everything I needed to do, and the recipe, how to make good alcohol. So I used to set this, you'd have to have this mash, and then you'd distill it. So one time, my husband liked to read all these little classified ads, and they were advertising flavors, you know, to put into brew, scotch and rye and gin and vodka and rum, I guess 6, that you could get these flavors to flavor, because those would be pure alcohol that you'd get. So he sent for it to the States, and it had to go through customs, of course. So this comes here, and we're putting it into that. I did the brewing, and my husband didn't bother with it. And one day, if a Mountie doesn't show up at the door, wants to know what I'm using those flavors for, because it was the days of the Prohibition. So I had to think fast, because you're caught brewing, you're in trouble. Well, I says, I use it for flavor around my cooking. I don't know if he believed me or not, but he let it go. Maybe he figured, oh, well, that little creature, she can't be too, cause too much damage here. But we had some people north of us that used to sell it, that brew and they'd sell it. And they'd get caught every so often, and then they find a couple $100. And they were good liberals, and the liberals were in power then in Saskatchewan. That was in Gardner's days, I guess. So then these guys paid a $200 fine, and the liberals would give them the $200 out of them, I suppose, government money. I don't know where but anyway, they'd pay. So they keep on with their business. That's the way it went on like that till, oh yeah, I remember that bootlegging.
I kind of hate to think of this, what we used to do, but the section house where Yestricks lived was at the far east end of town. And when these guys would come in with their home brew, across Tommy Mills's field, there'd be a big haystack, their straw stack. And they'd dump their home brew just to see if Mitchell was the corporal was in town. If he wasn't in town, they'd bring their home brew in. But we'd see them come across there, and then relieve them of 2 or 3 gallons of home brew. Jeez.
Well, everybody used to make their own. And what did they used to say? It used to cost about, well, the heat power never cost anything because it was all wood to cook it. And sugar was about $10 100 pounds, $10. And they used to be able to make about 10 gallons of moonshine out of that. So it didn't cost that much.
And we got to the house, and we just so got into the house when the big main storm hit. And so then we all went down in the basement. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 10 minutes or 15. And when we came up, the house was a terrible mess because it smashed windows, put hail inside of it. And then we went, I remember I walked to the front door with my dad, and he looked across the field. It was about 1.5 miles away, and Jimmy Ferrier's farm was there, and he can remember him saying so clear, "My God, Jimmy Ferrier's barn is gone." And you know, the funny part of it was he shouldn't have been able to see Jimmy Ferrier's barn because ours would have been in the road.
The most remarkable thing I remember about that storm was a yard a couple of miles southwest of here had Hall's barn, not barn. There was a piece of the barn, yes, it wrecked his barn too. A piece of the barn, a splintered 2x4, drove right through the trunk of the tree up by the house. And that splinter went through the tree and came out the other side. And it wasn't a small tree, it was 10, 12 inches in diameter in that trunk. How it went through that, I don't know. Had some power behind it. Must have been going fast.
This farmer's son, he said he had this dynamite out in the back of a old thrash machine and he wanted to get rid of it. I said, well, how many sticks did he put in? Oh, I don't know, he said. Well, I said, how many did you tell him? Oh, a few. Well, it was unreal. All of us, and he didn't even have the Lorraine backhoe sitting there. He'd moved it away over, so I knew there was something. Anyway, it went off, and I'll tell you, it was unbelievable. The peak on the front of the barn is the cupola that comes out. It took off all the boards out of there. It broke all the windows in the front of the barn. And there was a couple of old horses leaning over the edge of the fence, and I'll never forget that. Just poof, they took the fence and all with them, and across the field they went.
Oh, great dear Sharon, she ate what she used to be. And the other guy says, no, she never was. That was on the record. One of the records. I guess they learned the tunes off the records. We had a gramophone that, of course, you had to wind it up by hand and had these cylinders. They weren't flat like they were later on. They were cylinders, and so we had one of those.
Oh, the old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be. The old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be.